Okay, let's start with our motivation. So we we probably all do, have certain fears inside of ourselves. Fears of other beings, fears of different situations. But especially when we're afraid of other beings or other people, if we look there, it's because there's an image in our mind of what they're like. It's a very solid image. We see them in a very one-dimensional way, not as complete people with feelings and many different aspects of their life and so on. And so because we see them in this one-dimensional way, then we tell ourselves a story about them, then we become quite afraid. So it's very helpful here to expand our mind and see that whatever image we have cooked up about somebody is not the totality of who that person is. That everybody is very multidimensional. And within that, to see that there's going to be a way somehow to connect with everybody if we can see them in the multidimensional way, and we see ourselves in that way also, then we can find points of contact, points of commonality, points of interest, some way where we can communicate with them. And so when we see that, we change our image of who we think they are, and also when we change our image of who we think we are, because that contributes to the fear as well. Then when we see that we can touch base with everyone, it gives us a lot more confidence. I was thinking about that motivation just a little. Yeah, okay. Okay. How's that? Is it Still crackling? Is better. Okay. Thank you. So I was thinking about that because I had watched a video, which I sent the link around to all of you, about Charlottesville, and this one young woman who's incredibly brave interviewing some of these neo-Nazi, white supremacists. And watching my mind, it's like I have a view of what they have a certain physical appearance, big, beard, baseball cap, glaring eyes, my image, okay? I mean, they fit it. And watching how the mind, and armed, and watching how my mind, has this physical image of them, and then immediately it's like I know everything about that person. They're like this, and they're like this, and this, and this, and this, and this, and I'm afraid of them because they're uncontrolled. Yeah, they're armed and they're uncontrolled, and I have no power. And so all of this comes up like a flash. I don't know about you when you think about them, but this is what happens for me. And then seeing myself in a certain way too. It's like, well, I'm nowhere near their size. They win automatically. Yeah. They can outshout me. They can outdo everything. So this feeling of powerlessness comes. And then with that fear. And seeing how all of that it just existing in my own mind. Beginning with imagining how they look, and then who they are and how they are and who I am and how I am. And then the relationship is like frozen in this way. And thinking, that's not, how we do that with everybody. We can live with somebody too, and we have an image of who they are, and that we always approach them that way, and so it always turns out to be the way that we approached because that's all we can imagine. And so this is where I find, Dharma being very helpful in terms of, well, that person hasn't always looked like that. Yeah. They've once been like little babies. Yeah. Or cute little kids. Or in previous life, maybe they've been bugs or kitties or who knows what. They haven't always been that. Yeah. And then also, loosening, so not only loosening my perception of them, but also loosening my perception of myself. And I think this is where deity yoga comes in. And so if I imagine myself dissolving into emptiness and appearing as a deity, if I'm Yamantaka, I have a whole lot more self-confidence. Yeah? Because, or even Chenrezig, peaceful Chenrezig, because you know a Buddha isn't going to be afraid of some white supremacist. Yeah? And so here you see, okay, you can look at this person in a totally different way and see yourself in a totally different relationship with them. And then you can see that there's a way to relate to them and that they're not, one-dimensional caricatures, but they're human beings with feelings who have had certain conditioning behind them and whose minds are tragically stuck in a very suffering situation. So, so just a little tidbit to think about in case there's people you're afraid of. or people that you react to instantly. I saw myself in another, many different situations. I see how this comes up. One time, when I was speaking at Marquette University. So I was speaking to a classroom. So one student walks in, tall, kind of blonde hair, blue eyes, pinstripe shirt, walking with the confidence, how they walk with confidence, sit down, crossed one leg, over the other. And immediately, just by the way he looked and the way he walked in, I went, oh God, some spoiled rich kid who thinks he's at the top of the world and won't listen to anything. I just looked at him and instantly I knew everything about him. And I thought, oh God, I got to give this a talk to this class, and this kid's going to be glaring at me the whole time because, he's just like, he's so conceited and that, full of himself. I had seen him for 10 seconds maybe. Yeah. So it's just interesting. I don't know if your mind does this. Yeah. Anybody else's mind forms instant opinions. And that's what it's going to be like. And then to watch that as I, gave the talk, his body language changed. And he actually became interested in the talk. I thought he was just going to be sitting back there with his legs crossed, leaning in his chair. But he actually listened to something and became interested. Totally blew my preordained one-dimensional image of who this kid was. Yeah. And I think some of you heard me tell the story of when I went into San Quentin and I was giving a talk there, and some young kid, they always say, the lifers say the young ones are the worst because they're going to get out, so they're just like, what I'm going to do when I get out and get even with everybody. So anyway, for some reason he came to the talk, probably just so he had something to do to get out of his cell. So he came in, how they kind of walk, with this stride of, the gang member stride. Yeah, the gang member stride. Walked in, sat down. Yeah, right before I gave the talk. Okay, Cracker, what do you have to say? This is what I'm reading into the whole thing. And so again, I gave this talk and slowly, he went from this to and he started hearing his whole body language changed. Yeah. So out the window went my one-dimensional fixed view of who I thought he definitely was permanently. Yeah. So it's very interesting to watch this in your own mind. Yeah. And to really see how these preconceptions come up, and they're prejudice, aren't they? I mean, the white supremacists aren't the only ones who's prejudice. I'm prejudiced too against them, But prejudice is prejudice, isn't it? Doesn't matter. Yeah, because it just sets you off from communicating with somebody. So, interesting to watch how the mind creates these kinds of things, and then how we believe in them so much and limit ourselves based on these kind of preconceptions. And how just trying to see the other person in a different way, see ourselves in a different way, then we can find, in our own mind, the space to communicate with them. There may be lots of space to communicate with them, but we can't see it because we've put this image on them and on ourselves. Okay, so that's kind of what Dharma practice, one part of Dharma practice is about, is taking away all these false projections that we have about other people and that we have about ourselves. And especially in this time when so much is going on in the country, it's so easy to develop very fixed images that really have nothing to do with reality. And you can also see in this way, too, how when we develop a certain image of ourselves as a very one-dimensional being, yeah, I am like this, I can't do that, yeah, then how we likewise limit ourselves and we don't try to do things in a different way because we've already told ourselves we can't. So this is these are the kinds of things that really get in the way of our progressing spiritually. We have very rigid minds, you think? Yeah, very rigid, our way of thinking. Okay, so, we're doing this course in reasoning and debate to loosen some of our preconceptions and to challenge some of our beliefs. And so as we get into the course more and more and learn some of the debate formats, you can use them for debating philosophical things. But you can also use it for having a little internal debate with yourself over your own opinions or who you think you are or what you're feeling and the reasons that you're feeling this way. Yeah. So we make lots of syllogisms all the time. Yeah. I am depressed because somebody rejected me. Yeah. So we make that syllogism, and then, oh yeah, well, I'm depressed. They rejected me. There's no way to undo their rejection of me, their bad opinion of me. So I guess I'm just going to sit here and be depressed. Yeah. Do you see how we trap ourselves into certain emotions that way? Yeah. Whereas if we really examine the syllogism we're making, I feel depressed because so-and-so rejected me. Well, to start with, how do I know so-and-so rejected me? Well, I can tell by the way they look at me. Is that an accurate reason for knowing how somebody feels towards you? By how they look at you on a few occasions? Yeah. Not. Yeah. So we begin to see how we take small bits of information, create a story about them. We're sure this person can't stand us. Not only can they not stand us, but they're rejecting us. And then, of course, the conclusion that if somebody rejects me, the only thing I can possibly feel is depressed. There aren't any other emotions I can feel. There's that preconception in our mind too, isn't there? Yeah. Really? There's no other emotions you can feel if somebody else doesn't like you? Yeah. When your enemy doesn't like you and doesn't want to see you, are you depressed? No, we're very happy. Okay? So, to start using some reasoning to examine how our mind thinks and to start deconstructing all sorts of wrong ideas and the wrong emotions that, or the disturbing emotions that come about due to our wrong ideas. And the things we tell ourselves, So-and-so acted like this. The only way I can possibly feel is that. Yeah. Who said so? Who said so? Where did that come from? Something our mind made up. We always have a whole variety of ways we can feel in reaction to something. Yeah. And somebody does one behavior, there's also many ways we can interpret that behavior. And we might also try asking the other person. Yeah? Instead of mind reading. Okay, so using what we're going to be learning in debate to question our own experience. And to question the identities that we build up about ourselves. Yeah, this guy is a white supremacist. Okay, I know everything about him. Yeah, I am a fill in the blank, whatever you think you are. Maybe your racial, religious, cultural background. Therefore, he's that, I'm this. The only way we can relate is like that, or whatever it is, yeah? So this is all mentally created. Which is, so much the tragedy in human suffering, that we have enough problems from natural disasters, enough to cope with natural disasters, but we seem to specialize in making each other miserable. And it's all created by the mind. Yeah. So our mind is pretty powerful. We have to take care of our mind. Okay, so as far as I understand, you got as far as reading through the higher training in ethical conduct, is that correct? Yeah. So that would put us, as I look at it, at the top of page 24. Based on ethics, a person now has a chance of developing a stable mind. Okay? So in the 3 higher trainings, first we practice ethical conduct, because that, especially at the beginning, is regarding our verbal and physical actions, which are the easiest ones to control. And by learning to manage those, then that helps us to see what's going on in our mind that are motivating our verbal and physical actions, and then to start subduing the mind. Okay? So based on ethics, a person now has a chance of developing a stable mind. One of the 2 types of meditation is concentration meditation, also known as meditative stabilization. The other type is insight, which is primarily analytic meditation. Buddhists describe vast realms of higher levels of concentration, but they say that all that is required to pacify the mind adequately to achieve nirvana is a level called, he translates it here, calm abiding. I translated it as serenity. The Sanskrit word is shamatha. Okay, so it's a level of concentration. Without ethical behavior, a meditator cannot develop adequate concentration because the mind is too stirred up. Okay, so here we got to look at our experience. Think of how shaky and disturbed you become when you are angry, or if you have just stolen something, if you ever have had that experience. Yeah, so we do something unethical, or our mind is, there's a strong, disturbing emotion. Yeah, is your mind peaceful and calm? Can you focus on what you want to focus on? Forget it. The mind is bouncing all over the place when we're upset. Okay? Or when we did something unethical and it's like, oh no, I did that. Oh, I feel good that I did it, but actually I feel guilty. But what happens if somebody finds out? Well, I better figure out an alibi and how to lie about it. But I don't feel good when I lie, but I really don't want somebody to know what I really just did. So the mind is like, you know how it is? Okay. So concentration to the point of serenity represents another level of pacifying the mind. Concentration is compared to the stability of a flame. So imagine that you are in a dark room with nothing but a single candle. Then a breeze comes in through an open window and the flame begins to flicker. So what happens when the flame flickers? Can you see things as clearly? No. Okay. When this happens, it doesn't show the objects in the room as clearly. When the flame is stable, it illuminates to its full power, whatever the measure of that power may be. So when the mind is stable, not flickering with distraction, not flickering with strong emotions, not flickering with guilt or remorse or regret or anxiety that somebody else is going to find out or whatever it is. Okay? So when the mind is calm like that, it too illuminates to its full power, whatever the measure of that power. Okay? Based on ethics and meditative stabilization, we have a chance of developing the wisdom that is the final antidote to ignorance. Since Buddhists describe karma and life in the round of rebirth as invariably linked with ignorance, when a person achieves wisdom, that person will no longer create karma. Okay? That doesn't mean that the first time you have some understanding of emptiness, you don't create any more karma. And it doesn't mean the first time you have direct realization of emptiness, you no longer create karma. Because there's also, he's talking here about polluted karma. That's the karma that keeps us locked in samsara, the cycle of rebirth. There's also unpolluted karma that is created by the Aryas. In addition, Buddhists believe that the power of wisdom burns up all of the old karmic seeds, like exposing photographic film to a bright light. Then, having no karma left, that wise person will no longer be subject to rebirth. So there's different theories on this. What the Pali tradition says, and I think to some extent this may be the Mahayana position too, is when you attain the path of seeing, you have direct realization of emptiness. That doesn't immediately purify all of your negative karma. Okay? But it does stop rebirth in samsara in to the extent that I'm not saying it right. Okay, when you become an arhat or an eighth bhumi bodhisattva, okay, let's deal with a person at that level, then they've eliminated all the afflictive obscurations, they've eliminated the ignorance. they may still have seeds of polluted karma on their mind stream, at least according to the Pali tradition. But those seeds cannot ripen because there's no more craving and clinging. So absent craving and clinging at the time of death, then even there are the seeds that can ripen into a new rebirth. They can't ripen because the fertilizer of craving and clinging aren't there, because the person has eliminated craving and clinging. Okay? Okay, so that's why an arhat is no longer subject to rebirth. Yeah? In terms of a bodhisattva, that bodhisattva on the eighth ground, again, is not subject to rebirth. But they at that point have unpolluted karma, and by the force of their unpolluted karma and their prayers, then they can take rebirth and make manifestations within samsara or even out of samsara. Okay, so they believe that such persons could appear again in the round of rebirth, but they would not be reborn under the power of karma, as is an ordinary person. Okay, so once you've eliminated the afflictive obscurations, yeah, they say you're taking rebirth in samsara, but you're not really in samsara because you no longer have the full 12 links, but you appear, in terms of bodhisattvas, you appear in this world for the benefit of others. So they call that taking rebirth in samsara, even though the person's mind isn't in samsara. Wisdom is compared to the brightness of a flame. If the flame is bright enough, you can see all that is around it. In the same way, increasing your wisdom is like illuminating your world. You see the nature of things. Yeah? So when we see the nature of things, then we aren't fooled, and all of our preconceptions and our assumptions and our projections automatically evaporate and fizzle. So we aren't at their mercy anymore. What a relief, huh? Why would such wisdom be stable? In the Buddhist way of thinking, nirvana is not a created state. If it were, it could decay and reverse. Rather, it is a mere absence. It is a stable state of mind, free of suffering and the causes of suffering, free of dukkha and the causes of dukkha. Think of it like a room free of elephants, probably like the one you are in now. Okay, nice room free of elephants, isn't it? Okay, the absence of elephants in that room was not created, and it abides unchangingly. Okay, now it could be that someone someone came in and shooed all the elephants out before you came in, and by that effort created a room free of elephants. But a room free of elephants is different from the absence of elephants. Because a room free of elephants is an affirmative negation. You're affirming the room, you're negating the elephants. The absence of elephants is a mere negation. There are no elephants. Nothing is implied in its stead. Okay. However, the mere absence of elephants in the room was not created, and it abides without disintegration. In other words, that absence of elephants isn't disintegrating and changing moment by moment. Okay. It may happen that the absence of elephants in that room will go out of existence as someone brings in an elephant or two. Okay. So the absence of elephants is permanent in the sense that it doesn't change moment by moment, but it is not eternal because somebody could bring an elephant in. When we attain nirvana or liberation, there's no way for the afflictions to return because there's no cause for them to exist in the mind anymore. Whereas, the room that's empty of elephants, there could be a cause for an elephant to come back in. Okay. Yeah, you seeing the difference there? Okay. But while there are none, the absence of elephants in that room was stable. It's not changing moment by moment. Just as someone could bring elephants back into your big room, couldn't ignorance come back into your consciousness? Nirvana is compared to a candle that has burned out completely so that the flame is extinguished and the wick and the wax are gone. Okay? So here, when the wick and the wax are gone, there's no way for the flame to come back. Okay? If the wick and the wax were there and you just blew out the candle, somebody could light it again. But when the causal energy, the wick and the wax, are completely consumed, then there's no causal energy to bring the flame back. Okay? So when we've attained nirvana, the afflictions have been completely removed and there's no cause to bring them back again. Whereas, let's say when you realize emptiness conceptually, you have that realization of emptiness, but later when you arise from your meditation, you can still grasp at an inherent existence. You can still have ignorance because that ignorance hasn't been completely eliminated. Okay, so what we're trying to do in our practice is completely eliminate these things in such a way that they can no longer return, like when the wax and the wick are completely consumed. The image is that the flame is like dukkha, and the wick and the wax are like the origins of dukkha. When the candle has burned out completely, there is nothing left to relight. This is the image, this is the thought. It requires some faith to believe it, since it is not an obvious possibility. To him, it's not an obvious possibility. Once we understand, have some understanding that things are not inherently existent, then we can see how ignorance is a false mind, and then we know that it can be overcome by a correct mind, the wisdom that sees the absence of inherent existence. And in that way, the ignorance can be overcome in such a way that it can never reappear again, because it is a false mind, and there is an antidote to it that sees the opposite of the way ignorance perceives things. Okay? So as we practice and gain some kind of familiarity and conviction, then I don't think it requires an act of faith to believe that that our afflictions can all be banished. But it takes some learning and some practice, to gain that kind of conviction. However, you don't need to believe it in order to get on with Buddhist debate. Just store it away for possible future consideration. Okay. Since ignorance is the cause of dukkha, what they commonly call suffering, once ignorance is removed, dukkha will not arise. Thus, the central concern of Buddhism is to defeat ignorance. Remember that the most important topic of Buddhist philosophy is cause and effect. And the strategy is that if you do not want the effect, do not engage in the causes of that effect. And if you do want that effect, engage in its causes. Yeah? That's it. Yeah? Sounds simple, doesn't it? Buddhism says that we may be able to achieve our wish to have happiness and avoid suffering by a process of pacifying and harmonizing the mind. So this is why the procedure is a combination of ethics, concentration, and wisdom. Okay, the 3 higher trainings. The mind is initially calmed by ethics, then stabilized by concentration, then brightened by wisdom. With this harmony, peace unfolds. At least initially, it is a matter of faith to believe. If it is true, then this is a real possibility. It would happen slowly. It would be a gradual process. Okay, so we slowly pacify our mind, slowly develop our ethical conduct, concentration, wisdom, and compassion, and so on. What is the context of this wisdom that liberates? Buddhism presents itself as a middle way between 2 extremes. We can see this in the life story of the Buddha, who went from a life of indulgence as a prince to a life of sensual denial as a renunciate in the forest, before he struck a middle way of sensible moderation adequate to sustain life. Okay? So that's the initial meaning of the middle way, not sensual indulgence, not sensual, abstinence and torment, but some way in which you keep your body healthy and alive so you can use your mind to practice. Okay? We tend to be big extremists. Yeah? In most areas of our life, we are so extreme, not only in this way, but in so many other ways, It's got to be this way, and if it's not that, then it's got to be the other way. It is kind of like, I find I might say to somebody, I'll use the volume here as an example, though it doesn't have. I'll say, turn down the volume a little, and then it gets turned down a lot. And then you say, turn it up a little, and then all of a sudden it's blaring. Okay? Yeah? It's very hard for us to, even when something's qualified by, add a little salt, then it gets a whole lot. Don't add so much salt, then they don't add any. Yeah? So, we very easily go to extremes. So that's one extreme, either indulgence or I'm the renunciate. Nothing gets to me. I'm off in my cave, contemplating reality of chocolate cake. Yeah. However, the more important sense in which Buddhists speak of their religion as a middle way is in reference to their theory of what exists, their ontology. That is, the Buddhists seek to avoid the 2 extremes, the extreme of existence and the extreme of non-existence. So here you have to understand what existence and non-existence mean. The extreme of existence is the false belief that something exists when in fact it does not. Okay? So the extreme of existence is not that things exist. It's that things that don't, you think things that don't exist really exist. Okay? And the extreme of non-existence is the false belief that something does not exist when in fact it does. Yeah. So again, we go back and forth between these 2 extremes, We're trying to understand things. I believe in God one day. Next day, I I don't believe in anything. The world is just happenstance. Yeah? I mean, we go back and forth to two extreme views, completely missing out how things actually exist. In terms of the Buddhist theory of what exists, an example of the extreme of existence is the false belief that there is a permanent, unitary, independent self that is the core of who you are. Yeah? Many of us grew up with that idea, didn't we? Yeah? We have a soul. There's an independent, permanent, person who we are somewhere inside, our soul. Yeah, we grew up with this idea. We believe it. Permanent, partless, independent soul. Such a soul does not exist. Yeah, and there's so many refutations that can prove the existence of that kind of soul. What? The non-existence, sorry. Yeah, that can prove the non-existence of that kind of soul. Okay? And yet, there's something in us that really likes the idea of there being a soul. Yeah? Something kind of a little bit emotionally gratifying. There's a real me that is never, ever, ever going to disappear. There's a real essential thing, that you can take my body away, you can take my mind away, you can take everything away, but I am still there, permanent, partless, independent, in control. Very appealing, isn't it? Yeah? Okay, so that's why you see that many religions assert this kind of soul or self, because emotionally it just is like, okay, I'm not going to go out of existence. There's something that's really me. Okay. Of course, if you begin to check, is it possible for such a soul to exist? It's totally impossible. Yeah. Why? Well, if you say that there's a real permanent soul that carries the karma, from one life to the next life, well, something that's permanent cannot change. So how can it carry karmic seeds? Because being implanted with karmic seeds, and then those karmic seeds ripening and ceasing, that means that, the soul, the person, the self, would have to change. But that contradicts the idea of it being permanent. So, so the Buddhists deny this kind of person. And in denying it, the Buddhists are claiming ground specifically at odds with the Hindus, who very clearly assert a permanent, unitary, and independent aspect of the personality that is the core of you. I think all theistic religions, Permanent means something that exists but is not changing moment by moment. Unitary means something that is indivisible, so that thing does not depend on its parts to exist. It's one monolithic thing. And independent means something that exists apart from depending on other things, such as causes and conditions that bring the person into being. An ethical example of so that's the extreme of existence on a philosophical level. Then he says an ethical example of the extreme of existence is the belief that if you have some measure of wisdom, then it does not matter what you do. So-called crazy wisdom. Okay? So if you have, a limited measure of wisdom, then there's no good, there's no bad, you can do whatever you want. Okay. So that's ethically, falling to the extreme of existence, because that kind of thing doesn't exist. A limited measure of wisdom does not put you beyond karma. Buddhists say any more than authority would put you beyond the law. Okay, I'm sorry. Let me read that sentence again. A limited measure of wisdom does not put you beyond karma, Buddhists say, any more than authority would put you beyond the law. Okay. Moreover, if a person becomes fully realized, as the Buddha is said to be, then such a person would not be immoral. Yeah. As Padmasambhava, also known as Guru Rinpoche, said, in regard to wisdom and ethics, though your view may be as high as the sky, your ethics must be as fine as flour. Okay. Yeah. So this is one, big misconception in the West about Tantra. Yeah. There's crazy wisdom, and so you're no longer bound by ethical things. There's no good, there's no bad. You do whatever you want because you have wisdom. Yeah. Actually, if you have wisdom, your ethical conduct becomes completely perfect. Yeah. Because you no longer have any intention to harm, and you monitor your body, speech, and mind very, very well so as not to harm others. So your ethical conduct becomes very fine, and you respect cause and effect because you realize that although things are empty of inherent existence, on the conventional level, cause and effect function. Okay. That quote by Guru Rinpoche is a very nice one. Yeah. Okay, so somebody who's highly realized would not be immoral. It's that simple. For the Buddhists, the prime example of the extreme of non-existence, the false belief that something does not exist when in fact it does, is the false belief that the person does not exist. That is, according to their way of thinking, if we think that there is no person at all, then we have fallen to the extreme of non-existence. So this also is very tempting, especially in Buddhist language, when you hear we meditate on selflessness, or we meditate on no self, or the Buddha said there is no self, then some people take that literally, thinking that there's no person whatsoever. Okay? What it means is there's no permanent, partless, independent self. There's no inherently existent self. But if people don't understand, then they think there's no self at all. In this case, what is in the world is going on right now? If I don't exist and you don't exist, then what's happening? Yeah. So Buddhists say, yeah, people exist. Cause and effect functions. But things do not exist in the way they appear to us, because they appear to us in a mistaken way. Many people think that this is what Buddhism teaches, that, there's nothing, so they think Buddhism is nihilistic. They believe that since Buddhists assert the selflessness of persons, meaning the emptiness or lack of a self of persons, then they deny there is any person at all. This is not their position. Though Buddhism is not monolithic, for there are many differing positions and points of view, all Buddhists agree that at least there is no permanent unitary independent self. Still, at the same time, they all agree that there is a person. otherwise Buddhism would fall to nihilism. The prime ethical example of the extreme of non-existence is the false belief that there is no effect of our actions. Okay? So, that whatever we do, there's no ethical dimension to our actions. Yeah? They may have a result. I punch someone in the nose. The result is he gets a bloody nose. Besides that, there's no other effects. Okay, so that's a wrong belief, yeah. Clearly, this false belief refers to the moral effects of actions. In practical matters, we can all see that, for instance, when we wash a car, it gets cleaner. Or when we gather the workers and the materials, we can build a house. The Buddhist moral belief here is that there is karma, so what they are characterizing as the extreme of non-existence is the idea that there will be no negative effects of what we do, killing, raping, stealing, and so on, so long as it does not bring any retribution in this life, for example, from legal authorities or vengeful relatives. Yeah, so this view, ethical view, you can do whatever you want. Doesn't matter. Just, don't get arrested and don't have your relatives take revenge. Yeah, but other than that, fine, do whatever you want. There's no effect from that. I held that view at a certain point in my life. Yeah, I thought, when I die, I'm dead. So, whatever the effects of my actions are, they're going to happen in this life. As long as the authorities don't find out, my parents don't know, I'm clear. Yeah? And that's a really insidious wrong view, because under the influence of that view, then we give ourselves permission to do all sorts of horrible things. Such a view that there is no moral or spiritual effect of actions is fertile ground for bad behavior. Unfortunately, it is a view that is held by many. Isn't it? Yeah. And even by people who think there is some ethical effect of their actions, when we're overpowered by some kind of disturbing emotion, our belief of karma, goodbye. We don't believe in karma. That person insulted me, I'm going to get my revenge. We don't think, it's going to create the cause for an unhappy rebirth, or it's going to create the cause for me to, face a lot of criticism in future lives. No, goodbye. Cause and effect, karma, it evaporates. I want to do what I want to do. Yeah? It's amazing, isn't it, how we can meditate on karma, talk about karma, and when the mind is afflicted, out the window. Yeah? So if you eliminate the extreme of existence, the false belief that something exists when in fact it does not, and the extreme of non-existence, the false belief that something does not exist when in fact it does, what are you left with? You eliminate those two. A correct understanding of what exists. Okay, so that's our goal. This is the intent. You no longer believe something exists when it doesn't, and you no longer believe that something does not exist when it does. You've got it right. One of my teachers, Khyentse Yeshe Thupten, a renowned scholar who was said to be especially skillful in topics of valid cognition. In Sanskrit, that's the word is pramana, or in Tibetan, it's sema, which is the general area of Buddhist reasoning and debate, said that valid cognition is the measure of what exists and what does not exist. It's a nice definition of valid cognition, isn't it? In Tibetan, the topic of valid cognition is pronounced as sema. The syllable se occurs in the interrogative katse, meaning how much or what is the measure. According to Khenzo Yeshe Thupten, sema means measure, and the Sanskrit pramana originally referred to balanced scales, like the scales of justice, the kind used in the Indian marketplace. So the intent of the study of valid cognition, which is the starting point for all Buddhist philosophy, is to supply a tool that enables us to measure what exists and what does not exist. Okay? So that's why in Volume 2 of the Library of Wisdom and Compassion, one of the early chapters is about reliable cognition. You know, what is non-deceptive cognition? Yeah. Buddhist reasoning and debate is not logic, although logic is involved. Logic undertakes an investigation of the formal validity and invalidity of arguments. Logic focuses primarily on the form of the arguments to determine whether or not the argument works. Within Buddhism, reasoning and debate are not ends in and of themselves. Rather, they are respected as tools for approaching a final understanding. So this is important. The reason for study, for debate, for learning reasoning and so on, is not to win arguments. It's not to establish yourself as someone on the debating ground who can defeat everybody else and prove them wrong, so that you can gloat about how smart you are. The reason for doing all of this is to get at the nature of reality. And why do we want to get at the nature of reality? So that we can attain liberation. Okay. Rather, they are respected as tools for approaching a final understanding. In Buddhist thought, reasoning and logic are included in the topic of valid cognition, which is focused on what are reliable consciousnesses and what are not reliable consciousnesses. Valid cognition includes perception, so direct perception like sense perception, as well as rational discourse. But the intent is to establish a few reliable procedures and then move towards understanding the measure of what exists and what does not exist. So you learn, how to make a syllogism. You learn, the correct forms of syllogism, what kind of syllogism works, what doesn't, what is a consequence, and so on. So you learn all these logical arguments, but then the real purpose is to apply those so that we can figure out what exists and what doesn't exist. Of course, most people are not trying to sort out the mode of existence of phenomena. Even so, clearly our beliefs and assumptions about how things exist strongly influence what we do in life. Don't they? Ever? Yeah? Our beliefs about how things exist and how the world functions, forms the core foundation of what we do in our lives. Without saying how things actually exist, since I don't know, we can note that many people proceed in life in fervent commitments to one or another view of how things exist. And sometimes they switch around. Sometimes people will deny all spiritual beliefs for years and then suddenly make a commitment to Jesus as their Lord and Savior. Sometimes faithful people will give up and deny all their old beliefs. That happens too. In fact, people very often flip back and forth. I believe this, I don't believe it. I believe it, I don't believe it. Yeah? Some people spend a lifetime ramped to one side or the other, but then there is also a lot of flipping around. This is what I call ontological bipolarism. Okay, going back and forth between the extreme of existence and the extreme of non-existence. Yeah? And, it's because our mind is so cloudy. So I know for myself as a child, I was taught that God exists, so I believed in God. Yeah? Then I got to high school, I started questioning things. Then God was out the window, and I was completely nihilistic. Yeah. Then I met the Buddha Dharma. Then I don't know what I believe. Which extreme I'm at now. Yeah, sometimes I like Prasangika, but Svatantrikas, yeah. Okay. It is easy to see this unsteadiness in our own emotional relations. Maybe there was someone you used to be willing to drive 5 hours just to have a day with, but now if you see that person coming your way, you duck into a shop and wait until that person passes. Yeah? So this is, emotionally, philosophically, we're totally yo-yos. Aren't we? You madly in love with somebody 1 year, next year you don't speak to them. Yeah? You're sure when you're madly in love, this is it. There's nothing higher. This person is 100%. And then next year, get out of here. It's like that, isn't it? We're completely fickle. And so also philosophically fickle. That sounds good. Philosophically fickle. Yeah? That goes with, what did he say, philosophical bipolarism. Ontological bipolarism, yeah. Okay. You all must have heard stories of people who used to be very close, but now never speak. Maybe you were the person of that story. Yeah. I think this emotional unsteadiness is related to our ontological unsteadiness, so it will be helpful to try to sort it out. I think they're very related. Yeah, because when we grasp people as inherently existent, then they are inherently wonderful. The relationship is permanently fantastic. Yes, you can see that grasping of permanence, inherent existence, underlies that whole emotional, I found the one and only that I'm going to be with for my whole life. But if you have some view that things are impermanent, that things are not inherently existent, then you have this appearance of, this fantastic person, and you go, oh yeah, right. I'm not going to get fooled by that appearance. This is some sentient being who wants to be happy and not suffer, and nothing more than that. Okay, so calm yourself down a bit. There is a saying from the Japanese Zen tradition of Buddhism that seems to express well this ontological bipolarism. It is drawn from a discourse attributed to Qingyuan Weixin of the Tang Dynasty, a master of the Chinese Chan, predecessor of Zen Buddhism. Okay, so Chinese Chan was the predecessor of Japanese Zen Buddhism. Yeah. So he said, 30 years ago, before I began the study of Zen, I said mountains are mountains, waters are waters. After I got insight into the truth of Zen through the instructions of a good master, I said, mountains are not mountains, waters are not waters. But now, having attained the abode of final rest, that is, awakening, I say mountains are really mountains and waters are really waters. Okay, have you heard that before? Yeah? Do you know what it means? No? Okay. When we, as ignorant, uninformed people, when we see something, this is a clock. This is really a clock. Any idiot in the world knows this is a clock. It's so obvious. Yeah. So that's like the mountain is the mountain. The clock is the clock. When you start meditating on emptiness, then you ask yourself, well, what really is the clock? And you start dissecting all the pieces of the clock. So you take off this piece of metal or plastic and the plastic on the back and you spread out all the pieces there. And when you look at all the pieces, you don't see a clock anymore. Yeah, there is no clock. Yeah. But you don't stop there. Yeah. Then, then you go back from knowing the ultimate nature of the clock to the conventional. And that you see, when you put the pieces together and we give it the designation clock, then it functions as a clock just fine. So it becomes a clock again. Actually, it was a clock all along, but we didn't. At the beginning, we didn't see the clock correctly. We thought it was an inherently existent clock. In the middle, then we, decomposed it, deconstructed it, and we saw no clock. Then we put the parts back together again, and this time, without grasping that there's a real essence of clock in this, we just see that we give it the name clock and it functions according to how we've defined clock. Okay. Imagine a new monk going to the monastery in the mountains. He looks out with untrained eyes and sees the mountains and waters nearby. Then he sits in zazen meditation daily for years, and then it is as if there were no mountains and waters. What had appeared so real upon the first arrival in time began to seem devoid of real existence. Nothing. Then, after more years of sitting meditation, once again there are mountains and waters. So, they say that when we all start out, with the wrong view of inherent existence, then we realize the emptiness of inherent existence, but our realization is not complete until we come out of meditative equipoise and then see that things still exist on the conventional level and they function on that level. At that point, then our understanding is complete. So it's not just the negating of inherent existence, it's the establishment of dependent arising also. Again, the monk affirms the presence of the mountains and the waters, but he does not see them in the way he did when he first arrived. They are indeed there, but now he knows the measure of how they exist. So how do they exist? Without inherent existence, simply dependent on other factors. His view has changed. This change is the essence of meditation and debate as well. The Buddha is quoted as saying, "To children I speak advice, and to yogis tenets." All of us have difficulties, and the Buddha offers advice to those who need it, but look for nothing more. Okay? So how do I make my marriage work? How do I practice Dharma in my office? We ask the Buddha for advice. He gives us advice. The Buddha advises us to avoid killing and stealing and reminds us to be kind and skillful in our activities. Yogis, practitioners of yoga, have undertaken to see the nature of things. So to them, the Buddha offers tenets. Probably the single best English word for yoga is union. It has the sense of yoga, of union with the divine, union of the sun and moon, and so on. The word yoga is cognate with, that is, a word known together with, the English word yoke, the wooden mantle placed on the necks of two oxen so that they can work together. Of course, it also works to translate yoga as yoking with. Yeah? For example, yoking the mind of the practitioner with the divine, or yoking together the sun and the moon, which refers to the vital force and the mental energy, or even to Shiva and Shakti within a Hindu context. Within a Buddhist context, we may speak of the union of the mind of a yogi with the mind of a Buddha, or yoking the mind of the practitioner with the mind of a Buddha. Okay? You know, at certain places you go, if you're meditating, they call you a yogi. Yeah? I know my teachers find that quite funny. Somebody walks in off the street, they sit down, they're learning meditation, and suddenly they become a yogi. Because in Tibetan Buddhism, a yogi is a very advanced practitioner, someone who has realizations, who has yoked their mind to the truth. The ideal practitioner of South Asian spirituality is the yogi, a male practitioner, or the yogini, a female practitioner. We normally picture practitioners of yoga in some sort of stretching pose. And if we are looking from the outside, we think of yoga as a sort of physical discipline. This is the Western view. It's not the Asian view of yoga. Indeed, that is a part of it. The purpose of the physical postures is to adjust the internal channels and the flow of the vital energies inside. This is all for the sake of increasing the yoga practitioner's clarity of understanding. Thus, the ideal practitioner does not practice just physical discipline, but also practices mental discipline in meditation and in analytical investigation. For thousands of years, the yogis and yoginis of India and all of South Asia have investigated the nature of existence as part of their spiritual practice. Their efforts are rooted in the view that the ultimate reality is always right at hand, and we can be liberated by seeing it. Beyond the physical and mental discipline of the yogis and yoginis, there is the discipline of the heart, which is most clearly laid out in Mahayana Buddhism, also known as Great Vehicle or Universal Vehicle Buddhism. Okay, so this idea that reality is always right here, we're just not seeing it. Lama Yeshe used to say that a lot, he would say, you think emptiness is way far away, ultimate truth is in another universe, and you have to go to that other universe. You say, ultimate truth is right here in this book. Is right here in this book. It's right here in the clock. It's right in yourself. And we'd all go, duh. What are you talking about, Lama? We're thinking ultimate truth is, like some kind of amorphous form that's glowing with light that's going to emanate from the book or the clock. That's its ultimate nature. You see how we're always grasping onto things that don't exist, thinking they do exist. Okay, let me just do the next paragraph. When the Buddha said that he speaks tenets to yogis, he was appreciating the mental discipline of the yogis in their undertaking to perceive the nature of reality and supporting them in that. Tenets means established conclusions. This means that a person has settled on that tenet as final. This points at an important aspect of religious systems, that they supply a worldview for their followers. When an event occurs, we may think that it has happened due to karma, God's will, Satan's interference, natural forces, or something else. So it's the same event, people interpret it in so many different ways. We see the world in accordance with our beliefs. That is why it is called our view. Now, Buddhism is not a monolithic view, nor is Hinduism. In fact, there are several Buddhist tenet systems. In India, for thousands of years, there has been lively debate between different groups, Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, and then later Muslims, Sikhs, and Christians. Though there has been skirmishes over the years, in general, the Indians deserve a lot of credit for open-minded inquiry free of violence. Yeah, His Holiness is always praising the Indians for this. You know, how they respect people from other religions, even though they disagree with those people philosophically. Yeah. Their affirmation of the place of reasoning in the spiritual process is one of the reasons that peace has generally prevailed. Yeah, because if you use reasoning, the idea in ancient India, if you use reasoning and if your view was defeated, then since you're pursuing the truth, you became a follower of whoever it was that defeated you. And if you defeated somebody else in debate and reasoning, then since your view was seen as correct, the other side converted and became, a Buddhist disciple. So this is how they did it in ancient India, because they were valuing the truth, and they were valuing reasoning. They weren't just saying my view's right and then clinging on to it without listening to anybody else's ideas. Yeah. Which unfortunately many people in the world are like that. This is my religion, this is my view, because this is what I was taught as a child, this is the way it is, the Holy Book says so, and I don't want to hear anything else. But as His Holiness says, you can always find a holy book that says what you want it to say. Yeah? And and he always says, if you're debating something, especially with someone who isn't Buddhist, but even somebody who is, you can't say, well, this is true, and then you quote the Buddha or Dharmakirti or Shantideva or something, because there's always some book that somebody can quote to validate what they say. Yeah, so he says you have to really use reasoning and think deeply about how things exist. Okay, so time for, do you have questions or comments or something like that?
I have two questions. Mm-hmm. So the Zen quote, it sounds like the type of realization this person achieved was just liberation, not Buddhahood, because wouldn't they say that the mountains and the water are both mountains and not mountains at the same time? And then
an arhat has the same understanding of the nature of reality as a Buddha does. That's not the difference between them.
Okay. When they say the mountains are mountains, they're saying they're dependent.
Yeah. They're not negating when they realize that they were empty. Yeah, they're just saying, okay, you see the emptiness. When you come out of your meditative equipoise, then you see that there is a conventionally existent object there.
Oh, the Buddhas can see both conventional and ultimate reality at the same time.
In one consciousness.
Right.
Others can see conventional and ultimate reality, but at different times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it sounds like this person only sees the conventional.
No, they can also see the ultimate.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah, but only the Buddha sees them at the same time.
Is the person in the quote saying it at the same time?
I don't know.
Okay. So then my second question is about unpolluted karma
Uh-huh.
and how that functions. How does that work?
Okay, it's karma created by Aryas, so they aren't, grasping at inherent existence, but they still have intention. So, the mental factor of intention is the basis of what most people say karma is. So they still have intentions, but their intentions are no longer polluted by ignorance. So they create that unpolluted karma. And then that unpolluted karma can be the cause of their taking what's called a mental body, a body that is the nature of mind. So many of the Aryas take that kind of body.
Are they bound by that karma?
No. I mean, their minds aren't totally liberated because they still have the latencies of karma, or in some situations some of them may still have the seeds of karma. Yeah, so they aren't Buddhists yet. But they aren't taking rebirth, in samsara under the force of afflictions and karma.
I'm not so used to these. So the negation that was affirming a room free of elephants, it's affirming a room and it's negating elephants, is that right?
Yeah.
Just the absence of an elephant without affirming anything, that's a non-affirming negative?
That's a non-affirming negative.
But you used another term.
Yeah, you can say non-affirming negation or non-affirming negative.
Yeah, I think you used a different term. You didn't say non-affirming, you said mere negation. Okay.
Huh?
I think you said mere negation. That's the same thing as a non-affirming negation?
Yeah.
I'm just used to the other term. Yeah.
Do arhats create non-polluted karma as well as Aryas?
Yeah, the arhats would create non-polluted karma.
That according to the Pali tradition, that the eighth Bhumi Bodhisattvas would have seeds on their mind stream, karmic seeds on their mind stream still. So in the Sanskrit
The Pali tradition doesn't talk about the bodhisattvas, they talk about the arhats. So they would say with the arhats, they may still have karmic seeds to cause rebirth on their mental continuum, but those karmic seeds cannot ripen because there's no craving. The craving and clinging have been eliminated.
But the Sanskrit tradition would say that there's no karmic seeds on the mind stream for a bodhisattva.
I think there must be some karmic seeds, but whether they would say they are polluted karmic seeds or they have somehow been purified, or because there's certainly virtuous karmic seeds on the mind stream of Aryas and on the mind stream of eighth, pure ground bodhisattvas. Definitely karmic seeds. But whether they would say that, all the polluted ones are still polluted, or whether they've been somehow because everything we create prior to path of seeing is polluted, so it's not like that vanishes. I've heard sometimes that some of the virtuous karma would kind of convert to unpolluted karma, but I'm really not sure about all of that, how that works.
I wanted to go back to your motivation and your introduction.
Uh-huh.
And I was just sitting here thinking, if I was new to working with my mind,
Mm-hmm.
I guess kind of get stuck as to how do you break through this? How do you even help somebody to break through these appearances? You know what I mean? I think what really came to mind to me strongly is the advice this holiness gives about really trying to look at things from many, many, many points of view.
Yeah.
And that kind of is the only thing that seemed palpable that I could say to somebody.
Yeah. Well, the thing I was talking about at the beginning, to break through appearances, we don't even have to talk about breaking through the appearance of inherent existence. We just have to talk about breaking through the stubbornness of our mind. Huh? Yeah, well, just, we get stubborn. I have this thought and this is reality. And even though we're constantly being proven wrong, we don't learn. It's like, someone makes some comment to you and you go, oh, that person, they're always criticizing me. I knew that what they really meant was to do this and that and blah, blah, blah. And you'd build this whole story up. And then and you're upset and anxious and furious and everything. But then let's say you go talk to the person and the person says, oh, that's not what I meant at all. What I really meant was X, Y, Z. Then you go, oh, gee, I thought they meant A, B, C, and I was going on, and I was completely wrong. Yeah? Huh? Yeah. Dialogue, and also just questioning things. When we say, I know they don't like me. How do I know? Well, because of the look they gave me. What kind of reason is that? People give all sorts of looks. Okay? So what I'm talking about is it's if we constantly believed everything we said, then the first time you had an argument with somebody you loved, the relationship would be over. You would never make up. But we're constantly being shown that our view is incorrect, that we misunderstood what the other person said, or what they meant, or they misunderstood what we said and what we meant, and that we didn't express ourselves, in a good way. And we're constantly coming up against this. But each time, we are so convinced our opinion is the reality of the situation. Yeah? So it's just, this is why the first meditation is the mind is the creator of our experience, to just keep checking and seeing this again and again and again. Yeah? So that every time we get greedy, we stop and say, is this object really that attractive that, I'm going to die if I don't have it? And every time we get upset, we stop and we say, is this really such an awful situation? Yeah. And, and just our own experience, it's like you have a strong emotion, but how long can you hold that emotion for? Yeah? It's like, I've got to have chocolate cake. I've got to have chocolate. I've got to have chocolate. How long can you hold the craving for chocolate cake? Yeah? Every single moment without ever getting distracted? Yeah? How long can you hold that craving for chocolate cake? Yeah? When you're really mad, how long can you hold that anger? It fades after a while, doesn't it? Yeah? I know for myself, sometimes it's like something happens. It could be good or bad, and it's like, I want to talk to somebody, and I have this feeling like, I've got to find somebody to talk to. I just want to share this with somebody. And I should really just talk to the cat. Yeah? Instead of going around and disturbing some human being. Because I see that, there's this, I have to share this with somebody. But if I wait 15 minutes or a half an hour, all that energy is gone. It's like, well, if I say something to someone and I don't care, it doesn't really matter. Yeah? But at that moment, it was like so strong. So it's seeing this, how unstable our mind is, that gives us, that's the opening the door to, not believing everything we think. And to seeing that, we don't have to get caught in all of our beliefs, all of our emotions, because if we just wait long enough, they're going to change anyway. Yeah, you can't hold on to it. It's like you cannot cry forever. You have to take a breath.
So kind of like going back to what you were saying, what if like I want to share something with someone out of compassion? So I reflecting on my thoughts, and I remember something really positive that person did for me, and I have that deep sense of compassion to share with that person.
Yeah, great. Go for it. Yeah, yeah. No, I wasn't saying don't share things with people.
Okay.
The purpose of what I was saying was we get locked into feeling whatever we're feeling and thinking as the only reality there is for that situation, when there could be many. We change in the moment, and so I wasn't saying don't share things with people.
Okay.
I was just commenting on, when something happens, it's like I have this energy, like I got to tell somebody. Yeah. Do you ever have that energy? Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So it's that, if I just, wait a little bit, it calms down, and